Hi, welcome to Go Tell Mom. I'm Dianna Kelly, and I've been momming for several decades, including tending my fur babies, kids I gave birth to, kids I mentored as a broadcaster and college instructor, my kids' friends, and my friends. I'm not a psychologist or doctor, but I do know how to dig up advice from those who are, and that's what I'll share with you. If you have something to share with me, remark, comment, question, please comment below. When someone tells you, do your homework, what does that mean to you? For me, it's digging in, reading all I can on a subject, getting up to speed on something I didn't know. For kids, it can mean spending time stuck inside at a desk when they'd rather be playing with their friends. There's been a battle over homework for decades, according to usnews.com. Should kids have it, or should everything they learn be in the classroom? Duke's Harris Cooper says when designed properly, homework can lead to greater student success, but too much is, well, too much. It can discourage students in their study of the subject. I always felt that way about math in elementary school. The word problems that asked you, if you were traveling on a train at 70 miles per hour, how many French fries would you eat for breakfast, would drive me up a tree and usually have me in tears. I would spend hours on one of those problems, normally because my dad would insist on helping me, and what he said didn't quite sync up with what my math teacher told us, or what I thought my math teacher told us. Worksheets are not the homework favorites of parents, students, or education experts. Susan Gordon of the Learning Sciences Research Institute at the University of Illinois Chicago says that type of task is agony for families. The goal becomes getting to the bottom of the sheet with all the answers filled in without understanding why it matters. It's particularly tough when the worksheet includes stuff that the kids have not been taught yet in class. Experts emphasize that effective homework reinforces skills the kids are learning in a way that's meaningful and hopefully enjoyable enough to stick in their memory. My memory of math is not good at all. My father would throw up his hands in frustration and say, "You're such a logical person. I don't understand why you don't get this." But stick me in a checkout line and I'd usually peg the total of a string of purchases before the clerk finished the tally on the cash register. I just didn't see the logic of word problems, so my mind would switch off. So my math homework would take hours for me to complete in 5th grade. There are factions who don't think you should be doing homework in 5th grade. Studies have shown homework is most effective in grades 7 through 12. The standard homework guideline recommended by the National Parent-Teacher Association and the National Education Association is the 10-minute rule. That means 10 minutes of nightly homework per grade level. A 3rd grader, for instance, would receive a half hour of homework per night. But think about that. Your 8-year-old who's been cooped up in a classroom all day has to sit at a desk at home indoors for half an hour. My mom would usually have us grab a snack before we went to our rooms to study, and she always asked what we had for assignments, and as soon as we were done, she'd boot us outside. Many parents are concerned that their kids are being overwhelmed with homework as teachers try to keep up with state standards, which continuously change. The flip side is that teachers are expected to be able to test kids on material that's based on what they should have learned in a previous grade, but didn't because the standards changed. It can be frustrating for the teacher, the student, and the student's family, which is why teachers give homework. KidsHealth.org says parents should take an interest in their children's homework and help with the organizational skills involved. It reinforces to the child that what they do is important, not just busy work. It works best when the homework is engaging and interesting for the kid. That means you don't do the homework or project for them. Yes, you can guide, but the actual doing needs to be done by them. They won't learn anything if you're doing it for them. Scholastic.com recommends staying nearby when your kid does homework, but don't be at their elbow. When you hover, you make your kid think that you don't think he or she can do the work. Does your kid have a study area? My kids had a couple. Their desks in their rooms for reading chapters or doing math, and the computer in the home office for writing essays, researching projects, or emailing project partners. I was usually home to check up on them and monitor any meltdowns. I also checked to make sure that they were at their desk and not playing with their handheld video games. You need to put the kids in a space with few distractions. Now, when I was a kid, if I had a reading or history homework assignment, I could usually con my mom into letting me do it in front of the TV because, well, I was just that good at it and I could concentrate on 2 things at once. Nope, didn't let my kids get away with that because I knew that was not a good idea. KidsHealth.org says keep kids away from screens and loud music unless they're doing research or consulting a fellow student. Otherwise, no cell phones. It's also wise to set up a routine so kids know I'm home from school, I grab a snack, then I hit the books. On days when all the teachers send them home with big assignments, you might want to step in and have them break it down into chunks. Okay, hit the least favorite subject first, then go take a ride on your bike for half an hour and come back and study for the spelling test. Then after dinner, we'll work on the history essay. It just makes sense to break it up like you would a gym workout. If you don't have an occasional breather, it's exhausting and frustrating. Having a printed calendar by their workspace can be helpful. If your child knows there's an essay due next week, he can tackle it a piece at a time this week, so it's not a big assignment due at the same time as a lot of math homework next week. It gives your kid a little more control, and it takes you out of the battle. Praise your kids when they do a good job. When my kids were up for school awards, I was always at their assemblies. Their artwork was always on the refrigerator, along with their starred math papers. My parents would take us out for a treat if we made the honor roll. These are ways to make your kid understand their efforts are worth it. This is Go Tell Mom. I'm Dianna Kelly. Lori Meyer's joining me, and we are educators, both of us.
We are educators.
Are familiar with homework, both with our children, with ourselves, and with our students. It's a challenge for instructors to be able to put together homework for students that is not just busy work.
Not just busy work. Let's get off the table busy work just for the sake of.
Yeah,
that's going to irk me as a mother, as a teacher. No, just busy work just for the sake of busy work. So
it's like, oh, they should be working on something. To me, if I've got a roundtable discussion going, which happened in one of my classes today.
Oh, very cool.
The one that your daughter's in.
There you go.
And we all started talking about stuff. I'm like, good, I don't have to give them a busy work assignment because they're doing it right here in class. They're motivated. They're talking about the subject, so I don't need to re-emphasize it, sending them home to read 12 chapters on whatever.
Exactly.
Or give me an essay on whatever. I mean, those are the kind of things that kids get stuck with a lot of times. My pet peeve was the worksheets, the math worksheets. And I know it wasn't the teachers. It was one of those things like department-wide we're doing
this curriculum. You're supposed to follow this textbook, and you have to get through this point by such and such time, and they have to master those skills by such and such, Can
you explain to me why timed tests are important? Because I never got that concept. If you're not doing emergency surgery,
then should it be timed? I know.
Or you're not rescuing somebody from a burning building, then why is that so important?
That is something I, to this day, do not fully understand. I don't believe just because you can be done the fastest means you're doing it the best.
Or that you're going to remember it longer than the other folks.
Right. Just because somebody can regurgitate faster doesn't mean they're truly doing more than just memorizing.
And immersing themselves in it.
And I want them to know the material.
Not just memorize it and spit it back like,
Right. Now, I think there's a couple of things that might be important at a young age to, I'm not going to say have it timed, but being able to retrieve information in a timely manner.
Yeah.
And like the basic foundations of math skills, like your multiplications, knowing that 3 times 3 is 9 and you're able to, or, 9 times 3 is 27, right? It's 27, right? But jokingly, but because those are skills when you go further into algebra, you're going to need to be able to just spit out some of those answers. Even if solving the problem takes you a little bit, you don't want to be stuck on the basic skills.
Right.
So I think doing it timely, not the fastest, but not the slowest. And there's many ways to learn multiplications, but you do need to practice. And that does apply to homework, but there's a fun way to learn multiplication. And it's not just drills.
Right,
remember the drills?
right.
I remember having to do drills all the time.
Well, my neighbor behind me, when my kids were going through the multiplication tables, and she told me about it. She said, because we had sliding glass doors, and we could wave at each other through the sliding glass doors, but she would put the multiplication tables in wax stuff or whatever it is, the stuff that you could get off.
Oh, the dry erase or
whatever it is. But you could write it on your glass, and it would stay up there for the semester. And that was how my kids learned the multiplication
See, and I love
tables.
that. And it made it fun and interesting. You did something creative, but it's so much more engaging.
Yes.
And, I did something like that with Jessica, like when we were having to practice the phases of the moon.
Right.
In her science class somewhere in elementary school. I don't remember that. And she drew pictures. Of the phases of the moon.
Right.
And then we taped them up to the cabinetry in the kitchen. So if she had to open up like one cabinet to get a glass, she would have to tell me the phase of the moon or match the vocabulary. And it wasn't like drill, but we just made it fun that way.
Yeah.
You know, and it just little things like that. And that goes back to the basic beliefs I, as an educator, but also as a person that didn't learn like everybody else. I couldn't just open up a textbook and read it and regurgitate it and take a test. That wasn't me. So I always go back to the VARK, the visual, the acronyms VARK, visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetics. Particularly the K, that's the hands-on, get engaged.
Yes.
And I know I struggled like with history growing up because it was just lecture or reading the textbook.
Yeah.
And you were telling me you had like this incredible, awesome history teacher.
Greatest 6th grade teacher. And she would have us do things like dress up as historic characters.
See, I love that.
Yeah.
And you have to do your research
to do that.
To be able to represent. And it's like you become very like fierce about what you're learning.
Right.
So you could do it right because you're really liking
fun.
it.
It was so much fun. I wound up playing Hephaestus when we were doing Greek mythology,
nice.
Which was not my favorite character to play. But I had to mimic a limp, and I had to have involved. I had to soak. And I learned how to do this. You soak cotton in coffee, and all of a sudden you've got a brown beard.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so that was my beard.
Nice.
It smelled good at least.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so it was fun.
But you remember that to this day.
I do.
I love that.
I also remember because I loved history because they were stories.
Right.
She told them like stories.
And that's what's fun about history, but if it's not done right.
Yeah, and she found us books that told stories as opposed to just so-and-so on this date and you have to memorize dates and all this. And that wasn't what we remembered. We remembered the stories.
We remember the stories, yeah.
But we did remember the dates because of the stories. So at the end of each semester, each quarter, she would have us do things like, one quarter we did a history roundtable thing where you had to sit down as soon as you didn't get the answer. And we went up and down the aisles in class. It was a big class. And I was so fascinated with what we were going over that I didn't notice I was the last one. I didn't notice I was the last one standing.
Yay for you. But you're just so into it. And that's, again, I think the more we can engage our students, or as a student, getting yourself engaged somehow by using those learning styles. So that's one, know your learning style, I think helps. But as a teacher, you're not going to have all of the same learning styles in your class. You're going to have multiple.
Right.
And there's also that hierarchy of learning too. You know, if you can actually teach it to someone, they say that you become an expert.
There you go.
And if you could teach it, or at least have those discussions like you were mentioning in your class, the kids, and they're kids, we call them kids, but they're, adults, young adults. Yeah. They were able to take over and have this full discussion about the key topics of what you were teaching them.
We were discussing,
And they're going to remember it better.
Yeah,
they're
of course
going
they are.
to be able to apply that skill or what that learning was. And that's better than homework.
It really is.
And that goes back to what we were talking about.
Yeah, it really is. Not to say I didn't give them assignments, but they, I think, were more eager about the assignments because they got what we were talking about in class, and they were bantering with each other about it and that kind of thing. And I thought that was really effective.
I think that is very effective. And they say too, and I don't want to just say they say, but there's been studies done on both sides of the coin on homework or not homework, or how much is too much and how much is not enough. And, depending on the age and the stage and the grade that they're in, there are some skills that need to be practiced again at home.
Yeah.
But is this going to be
something that winds up being parents' homework as well?
Exactly.
Because most parents are not on board.
How are they writing essays at 4th grade the way they are? The parents are doing that. And there is that work-life school balance too, because I do want kids out there playing when they're younger. I want them to be a kid. I think and I want them exploring a garden or something science while they're learning science and plants and photosynthesis and even the reproductive of whatever of the plant itself or
watching an amoeba split
or something like that. And them being able to do that, or making a little video about it or something. I want them to get more hands-on, and I think they'll learn a lot better. So I'd rather see that than, and like I said, I talk with educators a lot. Some of them have specialized and did their PhD in like curriculum instruction. I was working on my PhD in curriculum instruction until I had to pause for a little bit. And there is this whole, should we or shouldn't we?
Yeah.
And when is too much, and when is it not enough?
Yeah.
Or, and then like you said about the parents, is it
something that it winds up being a parent project or something that drives the parents crazy because their learning curve is not where their kids were?
Right.
It's like, think about math and how it's different from when we took it.
Right.
And what they're teaching them now. And I'm looking at this and
this is the new math. I don't know what this is, right?
It's like, I remember seeing with The Incredibles when he's like, why did they change math?
I'm still trying to figure out, and was it that Pluto's not a planet anymore?
Yeah.
And that we have another ocean. I mean, when did that happen? But that's another story. That's another. But now what I do like about homework is you do need to reinforce the skills, because not every student, and me being a student, always learning, I don't learn the same way as everybody. Some things I can learn faster, some things take me longer, and I do need to go over it. And I do like that parents can know a little bit more about what's going on in school, because when you ask your child, what'd you do today? Nothing, And so I like a little bit of that coming home, but I don't want the parents have to be sitting side by side the entire time.
Yeah.
Maybe help get them started.
Yeah.
And then they're off on their own, but it shouldn't be this grueling process every day.
Yeah.
So my daughter's done private school, she did public school, and she did homeschooling. And there were times when we got up in the upper elementary, early middle school grades, it was hours and hours and hours of homework / busy work.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, is it something with the way my daughter learns? Which she does learn differently. She's like me. She's intelligent.
Yep.
But we learn different. We don't just open up a textbook and can regurgitate it all.
Photosynthesize
yes,
it.
and just, be these awesome memorizers. And this was at an age when the kids were starting to get cell phones that like our parents, parents were allowing. And these kids are texting each other. And it's 11 o'clock at night. Like, what'd you guys get for this? Because I'm not understanding this. So there was many kids late at night
that we're
still doing homuck,
and
if you were involved,
about
and if you were involved in extracurriculars, you were wiped out at the end of the day. So that would be a great example of too much. And it was every class. In fact, it was so much. And this will be my little beef here for a second. Jessica was always very tiny, petite.
Yeah.
And bringing home all those textbooks.
They were saying some kids were taking home like 10 pounds worth of textbooks.
And you're like 4th, 5th grade, and she was barely 40, 50 pounds. So this is where I thought my brilliant idea was to get the used textbooks off of Amazon. So every year, spend $20, $30, buy the like news, and they were in better condition than the school's textbooks.
Yeah.
But at least I had a set at home, so she didn't have to keep bringing those back
Carrying
and forth.
them,
I mean, I thought that was a brilliant move, but it was so much every friggin' night.
Yep.
It was ridiculous. And Jessica is a strong math student, so she could accelerate very fast through it.
Yeah.
But it was going at a slow pace because that's what the class needed. But other subjects, particularly actually like the history, it just wasn't clicking for her. It was grueling for her.
Think of it as gossip.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it is.
Well, when we have those discussions about so that's what we try to do as a family. If they're talking about a specific thing in a point in history, we would have discussions, like you said, gossip, storytelling, and we would try to do that at home. That way she can contribute to it and learn a little bit more than just sitting there reading about it, because the teacher, I don't think, added the right element that she needed.
Yeah, and sometimes that's really the crucial factor right there.
Right.
You wind up with a teacher like the one I had in 6th grade. Then it's
she would
like,
love that.
That's the kind of creative, for me it was groundbreaking, and that's why I've always loved history.
Right.
Because I had a great 6th grade teacher.
And it's very important to know your history. I think all these gen ed classes are so important.
Yeah.
But what do you think it is that the teachers, and each teacher has a different teaching style. Each student has a different learning style. What do you think it is that, again, I had a teacher for history many years.
Yep.
It was just regurgitate what was in the textbook. And you had this very vibrant, let's engage in history.
Let's get into this.
That comes to with a teacher.
I think some teachers just, they may be more engaged themselves in the subject. It's
true.
like they're teaching a lot of different subjects, and this is just one that got put on their plate. And that's when kids...
And that happens in elementary because they teach multiple subjects.
Yeah. And then you wind up with somebody that's their wheelhouse, but math may not be. So, and they get stuck with a math class, and that's when you get students that are like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to pass this. And they shouldn't feel that way. And part of it too is we put a lot of pressure on students when it comes to grades.
We do.
And I'm not so sure that's a good thing. They should want to learn, but they should want to learn.
Right.
It should be something that is something that they gravitate toward, not something that they're like, oh God, do I have to?
Right. And they also think about, I think, the overkill that we're doing with state testing and all the end of course testing. I mean, maybe I'm not remembering this correctly, but I think I am. During my high school years and middle school years, I just remember we would have like one big state testing at the end of the year, towards the end of the year, somewhere between February and March, somewhere around there. You know, not just teaching to the test, but I think you need some type of benchmark to know, are you learning what, you're supposed to be learning for that grade level?
Right.
I think you need to have some kind of measurement.
And to be fair, a lot of these teachers aren't even told what those measurements are
Right.
until it's like, 6 weeks from when the kids are supposed to be taking the test, which is ridiculous.
Which it gets ridiculous, but usually the curriculum that is started at the beginning of the year is supposed to, match up to that state testing. At least the skills are, because there's the whole map of the academic map. But
if that map changes like 3 weeks before the start of the school year, then what happens?
Well, usually that's something that's voted. I will say, at least I can speak for the district that I'm in. It would have to be voted, and it wouldn't start anything new until the next year.
Which is good.
Yes, because I know that
that's fair.
I know that can be floopy in some other school districts, but we have not.
And I'm
in
thinking
my
about
years,
that because I've gone through a lot of
You've
school
gone
districts.
right. Yes.
With my radio career, we'd be going
sure.
from town to town, and you're like, what? Why is it like this here?
Right. And there might have been, if you were in different locations, you could have been like, we already did this in math last year, or, or we haven't done that yet, just depending, because each school district is different. Then you can get into the topic of, does each school district, again, have their own academic map of curriculum or district standards, or do we tie everything to state standards, or do we tie it to a national standard? And if you're going to start focusing on some government stuff, should there be just the national education that says, I'm making some of these words up, but these are all the curriculum that every state has to learn. If you're in 6th grade math, you're all going to be learning the same thing. So when you go to different states.
I mean, there are pros and cons for that, because you may never plan to move out of your state.
Right.
But what if you do?
Right. Should each district and or state have, or county, or have their own, I'm not going to say entrepreneur spirit, but they might have certain strengths that they do want to move faster along the process of the academic map than others. I don't know, or you have to be told you have to do this the whole time, everybody
the
in the 50
kids in
states.
their state may understand things like science better because they're hit with a lot of weather, and they grow a lot of things there. So of course that's going to be something that they face every day, because their parents are inundated with it, their friends, their neighbors, whatever their community is. So that may be a strength for them, but it may not be on the other side, for somebody living in New York City.
It might not be, you're right. What I found interesting over the years, the school district that I'm in, and I'm going to specifically talk about high school. Right. In high school, of course, all of the gen ed requirement classes are at each and every high school. Yeah. So of course, algebra, Tennessee history, biology, whatever.
But see, there's
the
a question
are.
there. Why Tennessee history?
Well, that's one of them. But that's one of them. They also have American history or early American history. Right. But there's 4 requirements for history. But I do think they throw in that state one. I think.
Yeah, they did that when I grew up in New Hampshire too.
Yeah. So I think they want you to have one of the state histories, and I think the other 3, one's American history, and I think there's a global one. So, but each high school has the gen ed requirement classes. But each high school has a little bit, it's almost like a college as far as they have a specialty. Yeah. So 1 or 2 schools is a little bit more emphasized in the arts, more maybe in theater and 2 and 3D art. They might have that, I guess, that student base that was more of that. So they still get everything else. They're still getting even some other things, like if you want to get into a nursing program, a pre-med program, or a vet, they still have all that.
Or be a broadcaster.
Or be a broadcaster. And then there's another school that, again, has all the gen ed stuff and a few of the other minors, I guess you'd say, but they have a really strong focus in the vocational schools. Right. So each school kind of had a little bit of an extra special focus. And you can actually transfer to those schools as long as you have your own transportation, because you'd be at a zone where you can get that specialty if you want to while you're in high school.
That's pretty cool, actually, to be able to do that.
Yeah, so you still get all your gen eds that everybody has to do in the state of Tennessee. You still get all the variety of, I guess you would call them specialty or electives, but then they have that big emphasis if you wanted to do that, which I thought was kind of cool.
Well, it'd probably make you more likely to do your homework too.
Exactly. It goes back to it, because would it be really homework? You're wanting to learn.
Exactly.
If you are a theater arts potential major in college, you can learn more in high school, you're probably going to be putting a lot more effort into it.
So if
like,
you read,
go figure this. Wait a second, we're on to something.
Yeah. When I was in high school, we would, in our senior year, we could take special courses.
Yes, I love that.
So you could take one in speech, you could take one in theater arts, you could take one in Shakespeare.
Okay.
You could pick some things. So some kids picked some things, other kids picked other things, but we all wound up taking things that we would bring with us to college or vocational school, depending on what you were doing.
What'd you pick?
I wound up with speech. I wound up with drama and Shakespeare. And I can't remember what the last one was now.
I'm trying to remember mine, but I do remember actually taking typing.
Oh, I did that. We were allowed to do those kind of things too in the vocational section.
I think I was able to do it, through I think in my sophomore year. I remember out of all my classes typing and becoming...
Dad made me take it. He's like, you're going to need this. Because I think he saw me as a secretary. Mom said...
That was my grandfather's push, like just in case you can always get a job being a secretary.
Yeah. Mom was like, and you'll need it to type papers in college.
Yes, that's exactly what my mom said for all those papers you're going to type in college.
There we go.
Talk about a mindset and a generational thing, but I do remember taking those typing classes.
Yeah, they were pretty helpful. Okay, so when you're setting your kid up to do homework, how do you do it?
As a teacher, and I have conversations with parents, I only answer this question as what I do with my child, as what I do as a parent. Right. And I try to have it in a quiet place, but a place that we always would do it in. And it's usually, honestly, in the kitchen or on the dining room table. But it's the same place. So if I was cooking or doing whatever I need to do, I'm right there for questions, just help them get started and right there. And I made a little, always had a little caddy of just pens and markers and highlighters and just little things that made it special.
Yep.
This is just yours. We take it out for homework.
Yeah.
Now, that would happen some of the time. When we were at home, that's how we did our homework. Like I said, I'd help Jessica get started, make sure she understood the directions, and then go. Yeah. And if sometimes we had to do one together, let's say it was a math worksheet, the busy work math that kept getting thrown out. Maybe we do one together, and then the next two, I just kind of would watch over and then let her be. But she was getting it right away. She'd be fine. Now, if you have a child that's in extracurriculars, you're probably usually doing your homework in a vehicle.
Yeah.
And that is not the best situation, but we still wanted to make sure that we emphasize it was a priority. Just because you're doing other things, whether we agreed with it or not, this is a life skill. You still have to do it.
Yeah.
So
my kids had desks in their room, and they get the stack, they go up to the room, and allegedly doing their homework, and I would check on them.
Right.
But
I think the checking on them is the important part.
Yeah, it really is, because there'd be times that I would see a video game get stuffed into a drawer or something like that, because that was back when they had
the little
ones. Now, my kids did not have cell phones. There was one cell phone that was a house cell phone. Sure. It would go with whichever kid was doing rehearsal or practice or whatever they were doing. They got to use it then. For the most part, and they didn't have computers in their room. There was one room that was kind of like an office. And the kids would, if they had to do something on the computer, they'd do it there. And it was right out front. Right. There was no way they were doing anything besides homework on it.
You could
so
see.
That would be the way we did it.
Right.
I was not a hoverer when it came to homework. When it came to math, that was completely their dad. That's Dad.
And that's okay. I like that. There's who to go to for these subjects, because we can't be good at all of them.
When it came to vocabulary, they always turned to Mom.
Right.
That was kind of my thing.
Right.
But my mother had in the bathroom, in the rack in the bathroom, because there was a rack in the bathroom, she had Reader's Digests in there.
I love those Reader Digests. Those are great stories to read.
But they also had the words in there.
Oh, right.
And they'd have the word quiz or word test or whatever it is. It's been a while since I've read them. It has been
a while, but I love those Reader Digest stories.
That was how we would come up with extra words. And I also loved a lot of the classical books, and they had great vocabulary in them. I'd pick up most of the vocab from the context in the sentence. Like, I never knew how to say pacify until I heard somebody say it, and I'm like,
oh, right.
But I learned that word from Little Women.
Oh, look at that.
Because it was the context.
I love that.
Beth would pacify Joe when she would have a fight with Amy. And that to me made me understand the meaning of the word. But my mom would let me read a lot.
That's
that
great.
was sort of
that is key
my
to a
thing. She would boot me out every once in a while. Like, you need fresh air. Get outside
Get out
now.
Get some vitamin D and some sunshine.
But for the most part, I was a bookworm, and she knew it.
Which your vocabulary must be just incredible. when you, especially growing up, way ahead of your grade level.
The other kids would be reading, do you remember the SRA things, the SRA readings? I'd be in the tan section when the other kids would be like in the blue or whatever and tan was like the 10th level, the one. Right. Because I'd get into reading the stories that were in them.
You like the stories.
I liked the story. And I'd get dirty looks from all of my classmates. And I'm like, I just want to read.
And that was probably me giving you a dirty look, because I was when I was younger, struggling reader. I was a big time struggling reader.
My daughter was too, initially.
Especially with dyslexia. At the time, there wasn't much that people knew about that, but reading was so hard. I enjoyed the stories, but I had to learn differently. And as I've practiced and gotten older, again, I'm a fantastic reader now, but it was such a struggle. Like I said, fantastic enough that did my master's, worked on my PhD.
Yep. There you go.
Straight A's and a high IQ, but it was a struggle. It was a struggle.
Anytime you've got something that makes you see the words that.
And if you're struggling, should that student have more homework in reading?
And that's a really good question.
It took me longer, so it automatically to read what you were reading, and which is fantastic. You got to really understand vocabulary where I didn't understand it, and it would take me probably 2-3 times longer to read the same thing you would read if I was lucky to fully understand it. So I'd be highlighting, I'd be writing this down. I mean, I had to put so much work into it. It paid off in the long run, but it was hard.
Oh yeah,
and you can go back to my teacher's notes in 1st and 2nd grade and see it was a struggle. They kept putting me in lower groups.
With my daughter, she was like one of the last in her class that was able to read. Well, she had a vision problem.
Right.
And we finally figured it out. Your big, beautiful eyes are not focusing. And I can't remember what it was, but one of her instructors was like, let's get her eyes checked. And we did. And she's like 2,200.
Oh, my goodness.
They've straightened out over the years, which is kids' eyes can do that sometimes, and hers
There's still young muscles that are developing.
Yeah. But when she was real little, 5-year-olds that were reading, and she's not at that point, and she's getting her letters sort of, but not, Completely. And then we finally figured out what it was. But that wasn't because of extra homework. That was, they would just work with her on it.
It was a different skill set that she had to learn, and it wasn't going to improve just by struggling reading over
making
and over
her do more of something that she was struggling with.
Which hours and hours, and then you end up hating, let's not use the word hate, but you really avoid doing that particular, in this case, what we're talking about is reading. You avoided it. You just, you would approach it like going to the dentist. You just did not want to go do that. And then all of your classes are mostly tied to some type of reading.
Yeah.
So it's a big struggle.
Yeah.
And when it finally does start
clicking
and growing and developing, and it might be a visual thing. Sometimes it's an auditory thing where you can't just hear the sounds properly that we're making. Or it's just how to pronounce a word and truly understand what that word means.
Yeah.
When it does finally... And it takes that click, but even
or
that
the
click,
light bulb going
it
off.
Starts. Yes, it takes a while, but when that happens, it's like wow, it's night and day difference.
Yeah, it definitely is.
But it doesn't help them doing more homework because of it.
You just have to figure out a different way of learning.
So what is the right amount of homework? Or is there? Or should there be?
They say it's 10 minutes for each grade level.
Gotcha.
At least that was... But
so 10 minutes for each subject in each grade level? Or just 10 minutes if you're first... Okay.
I think it was 10 minutes for each grade level, period.
Okay.
Which, think about it. I mean, you're going to give a first grader 10 minutes worth of... They should be able to connect dots and that kind of thing and make it fun and a game for them.
Right.
But... You're going to tell a third grader that they have to sit in the house for half an hour when in some schools they don't even get recess. They don't get any recreation.
They need their recess.
Yeah.
They need to get out there. They need to be playing. They need to...
Fresh air and not dodgeball.
Right. Hey, there's some... One day we'll talk about dodgeball. There's some pros and cons to the world of surviving dodgeball in middle school. That is true, too. Think about how great it would be if we could emphasize a little bit more of the play and letting the kids just get their wiggles out. They might actually be able to sit still a little bit longer in class.
Exactly.
And be a little bit more focused. Or if anything, I don't know. And then if we had a history teacher like you had,
Yeah, she was awesome.
Yeah. And
really
that can make a big, big, big difference. And then maybe what their project is that they're learning on in that history, like you said, you had to research your historical figure and
Which
probably
took
create
me to
an
the
outfit,
library.
right?
Gee, that was terrible.
I know. Go figure. You're going to the library, and of course, today's day and age, I love still hitting the library, but you can, internet search, and if you can make a costume or practice how you're going to be that character, like you said, with a little bit of a limp, or how you're going to do this, and that. And I guess you were saying your character married this other character, or historical character.
I was supposed to be married to, so part of my speech was mentioning her.
Right. So you had to learn about another character or historical figure as well.
Exactly.
And I mean, it could really just go from there. And you probably put more into it as opposed to it maybe being like an essay or an assignment.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Lori. It's been a pleasure discussing homework with you.
It's a pleasure.
And hopefully we gave some tips to a few people or made them think a little differently about
I like that idea.
How they have their kids study.
Because I don't think there is a right or wrong answer.
I don't think there is either. Kids are so different.
Every kid is different.
Yep. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Go Tell Mom, where we chew on stuff that you talk about with your mom, or maybe not. I'm Dianna Kelly. If there's something you want brought up, something you want to add, comment below, and I'll be back next week.